We're here to pick up the pieces. This is Warriors Wrap-Up on 95.7 The Game.
Golden State led 86-68 with 7:13 to go in the third. And then the Nets, Coach Fernandez and his squad did a great job. The Nets come away with a win, 128-120. So since that point, 7:13 to go in the third, the Warriors scored 34 points. The Nets scored 60.
Well, it is a little bit ironic that the music that seems to be flooding every single airwaves, all the streets around the country, is Kendrick Lamar, because my favorite song from him is called Humble, and that is exactly what the Warriors were tonight against the Brooklyn Nets. They got humbled by Brooklyn. Back-to-back losses tonight at home, 128-120, now 5-2 at the Chase Center. But this is a game that I think, and as people begin to kind of load into Warriors wrap-up here on 95.7 The Game, the number is 888 957 9570. I think this is an interesting game for a couple of reasons. Number one, look, you're 12-5, you're second place in the West. OKC officially jumps you after beating Sacramento earlier tonight to set up, I think, an intriguing and perhaps revealing showdown on Wednesday at home. But this, to me, is the first concerning loss of the season for the Warriors. Again, they only have 5 of them, so they've clearly played pretty good basketball through the first 17 games, but it's the first concerning loss of the year. And the reason why it is less about this game itself than, as you heard from Tim Roy on the final call, it's about the last 2 games combined. The Warriors blow another lead in the second half. You can make the case that the one against San Antonio was a bit more drastic. I know that the Warriors gave up 41 points tonight to a Brooklyn Nets team that was down several players. Warriors had their own injuries. Kuminga was out again. We can get into how much he was missed, and I think there's certainly a case for that, along with Melton, who's out for the season. But the Nets didn't play a true center in this basketball game. Like, they started 5 out. They played Zaire Williams at what I guess you could hypothetically call the center position. They played 5-out basketball, and they got a lot of threes up. They played extremely quickly, and up until about that moment that you heard from Tim Roy, 7-12 in the third quarter, the Warriors were playing pretty well, and then they fell apart, just like they did against San Antonio. So in the third quarter on Saturday evening in San Antonio, the Warriors were up 17 points with 1:55 seconds left. Tonight here on Monday, they were up by 18 points with 7 minutes left in the third quarter, and they just essentially can't get stops. They can't get enough offensive baskets to keep the Nets at bay, and things just kind of steamroll out of control. This was a basketball game that the Warriors, I don't know if the 18-point lead was as reflective of how dominant they were throughout the entirety of the game. The Nets get out to a 9-2 start. Steve Kerr called a timeout like 90 seconds into this basketball game. The Warriors did not start particularly well. They trailed by 4 at the end of 1, and then I thought used a really nice stretch from the bench in that second quarter, which included 12 straight points from Moses Moody. Gary Payton was a plus 10. Kerr was kind of managing his star players in the first half to some effectiveness, but the Warriors go into the break up by 11 after a 37-24 second quarter, in which, interestingly enough, they only commit 1 turnover, and Brooklyn basically hung around in the first half through 3-pointers and free throw shooting. And then in the third quarter, Curry hits a 4-point play, around 7.5 left, and then you get a TJD lay-in to put them up 86-68, again with 7 minutes and 12 seconds left. And then Brooklyn just goes on a freaking run. I mean, they respond with a 9-0 run, then it becomes 11-0, then it becomes 14-2. Curry was on the court for the beginning of that, but then after he left, it just felt like the Nets continued to use that momentum to slide. They finished the quarter on a 21-6 run. I think it ended up being a 26-6 run into the fourth quarter. At the 9:23 mark, that's when Brooklyn went up by 4 after a Shake Milton 3, and it was like, oh my gosh, here we go again, based on the game that happened on Saturday. Kerr, I think, tried to get a little bit too cute with some of his rotations at this point. I think this was a game that, he played 11. He tried to get a lot of guys in, and he basically tried to outlast the Brooklyn Nets, understandably in anticipation of a much more impressive opponent coming in on Wednesday. But in Kerr trying to get cute, in Kerr trying to suppress Curry and Draymond's minutes, in Kerr trying to kind of mess around with different rotations. I think in the process of experimentation tonight, the Warriors lost this basketball game. That was a very winnable game. This was one in which they were favored, I think, by 12.5, 13.5 points. And that's not to say that teams don't lose games in which they're favored by double digits. I'm just trying to impress upon you how much of an expected victory this was. The Spurs loss to me, and Kerr talked about it pregame, was one of fatigue. I thought the Warriors, after 3 games and 4 nights, just wore down. And it was reflective, and even Curry not looking very good. That wasn't necessarily the case tonight. When Steph and Draymond checked back in with 7.5 left, it wasn't as if they didn't have themselves, didn't have their legs under them. Curry hit a couple shots, but the Warriors defensively just could not stop anybody. And maybe the most concerning part about the fact that they couldn't get a stop was the fact that Cam Thomas, who's an absolute bucket, maybe the best offensive threat, is the best offensive threat for the Brooklyn Nets. They couldn't stop him through the first 3 quarters. He ended up with 23 points in 23 minutes through 3 quarters. He didn't play in the fourth quarter. Instead, it was Dennis Schroeder. Instead, it was Zaire Williams. Instead, it was Jalen Wilson. Instead, it was a lot of guys that probably many of you have not heard of. We're getting into this. We're getting into this game and getting into the box score. So, Cameron Johnson, probably their second best player in this game for the Brooklyn Nets, only played 14 minutes in this game. Jalen Wilson played 40. Zaire Williams played 37. Keon Johnson, a Spurs throwaway, had a big 3 down the stretch. Shake Milton, a Sixers cast-off, who is not a bad player by any means, but not a guy that the Brooklyn Nets tonight essentially played 7 dudes. I know that Trenton Wofford finished the game. He played 17 minutes. Cameron Johnson played 14. Cam Thomas played 13. This was a game that was pretty much a tough one to stomach if you're the Warriors. The Brooklyn Nets shot 50% from the field. They made 23s on 45 attempts, which might be the most concerning number, the amount of attempts that they got up. And they got to the free throw line 30 times. A lot of that was Cam Thomas, and he gets to the line at will, but they made 26 of them. The Warriors, meanwhile, 17 free throw attempts, not an insignificant amount, but they only made 11. They shot 41% from 3. They actually got one more 3 up than the Brooklyn Nets did. They shot 48% from the field, but where the Warriors got hurt tonight, and it wasn't completely in the fourth quarter. Some of that, I do think you have to tip the cap to the Nets. Like these are pro players. Those guys hit a couple of really difficult baskets, in which I felt like the Warriors were defending well. But once they got rolling, especially down the stretch of that third quarter, the rim just opened up. It was like an ocean. They were just flooding in shots. And so I think that tonight, again, they hung around in the first half. They even hung around through the middle part of the third quarter because they got to the stripe, because they hit threes, and they basically gave themselves a chance to win. Also, the Warriors allowed the Nets to hang around and really build a lead in that first quarter because they turned the ball over enough for the Brooklyn Nets to take advantage. Now, 12 turnovers is nothing to scoff at. You're not saying that's a large number, especially compared to some of the gaudy turnover totals that the Warriors have had in past games and past years. But the 12 turnovers led to 26 points. So the quality or the type of turnover, I think, is something also to note for Golden State. Live ball turnovers killed them in this basketball game. And at points throughout this season, when you look at the 5 losses, there are some receipts that you can take from those games and say, live ball turnovers hurt them. It kind of bleeds into transition. It kind of stagnates them offensively. And I think the Warriors also suffered tonight in the fourth quarter. They scored 28 points. They didn't really do much in the third, and that was primarily because of their bench. But even though Andrew Wiggins had 18 points in this basketball game, a lot of it didn't really come until, I would say, I think he had 13 points with about 6 to play in the fourth quarter. The Warriors outside of Curry didn't have a secondary bucket getter, and that is where Jonathan Kuminga, I do think, was missed tonight. Not that Kuminga is going to step in and score 20 points, but outside of Moses Moody, Lindy Waters III had 10 points at the half, scored 3 in the entire second half. Curry didn't have a running mate tonight. And Wiggins has been fantastic, mind you. He's been very good scoring the basketball, 4 straight 20-point games entering tonight. the most he's had since the 2022 season, in which he was shooting 40%, 17 points per game. But tonight he wasn't able to get it going. Had a spot up three late, got to the rim, but it wasn't an impressive 18 points tonight, in my opinion, from Andrew Wiggins, who played a game-high 33 minutes for the Warriors. Meanwhile, the Brooklyn Nets were basically getting whatever they wanted. Dennis Schroeder had 31 freaking points in this basketball game. And you look at what he did in the fourth quarter, he absolutely took over. He had 17 points in the fourth quarter. And again, it highlights, I think, the Warriors' inability to keep quicker guards in front. That's something we have seen a little bit of. I think they don't mind playing defense against wings, but quick players have, at least over the past few games in the last week, I've noted, been able to penetrate relatively easily against this Warriors team. And I think that's why Kerr, you saw, just kind of ditch the five almost entirely. Trace Jackson-Davis wasn't super impressive, in my opinion, in this basketball game. And Kyle Anderson, at times, even as the third center or the small ball five, was getting played off the floor. Kevon Looney looked a little bit slow, although I thought he had a nice stretch, specifically when the Warriors made their run in the second quarter. But, Golden State, I think, was looking for answers defensively. They tried to go small with different lineups. Pods was getting hunted down the stretch. Even Gary Payton II wasn't able to do everything, and he's probably their best perimeter defender outside of Wiggins, but especially against quicker guards. I mean, that's who they tried to put Peyton on. They tried to put Schroeder on Peyton. So, I think the Warriors have a couple of things to look at. But overall, I am curious what people are feeling about this basketball game at 888-957-9570. Again, that's also the number for the Comcast Business text line. Warriors wrap up on 95-7 the game. Evan Giddings with you live at Chase Center after Warriors fall to the Brooklyn Nets by a score of 128-120. Their first real back-to-back streak of lost games. The first real games that you kind of look up and say, I wonder how that happened. And it's an eerily reminiscent feeling to last season, in which we found ourselves in this position quite a few times after being up by double digits in the second half, after losing to inferior opponents. San Antonio, I think, was 500 in that game. So the Nets do also mark the first time the Warriors this season have lost to a below 500 opponent. And again, that kind of falls into the category of concerning for me. Does it force wholesale changes? Probably not, but it's a different reason tonight than why they lost on Saturday. I think they lost because of fatigue on Saturday, which doesn't necessarily bother me that much. Tonight they lost because they were outplayed, and they were outplayed by a team that isn't as good as them, that was probably less healthy than they were, and that should not have been in that basketball game for as long as they were. But they absolutely deserved to win. The Nets did tonight, and the Warriors absolutely deserved to lose. So, again, this is from the 510 on the Comcast Business text line. It'll be interesting to see what the excuse is for tonight's debacle. The visiting team played last night, so the Warriors were out of focus. Yeah, the Nets, I mean, they did beat Sacramento. Not that that's anything to write home about, but the Nets are, basically, like, that game actually kind of made a little more sense, because I believe if you look at that game, outside of De'Aaron Fox, Sacramento didn't have much offensively. Actually, I take that back. Sabonis and DeRozan both came back for that game. Malik Monk was out, but nonetheless, Sacramento also fell victim to the Brooklyn Nets, who appeared to be just on freaking heaters. Cam Thomas scored 34 in that game, by the way. Did not have a same, I guess, finale as he did against Sacramento. But another kind of string of lines was, Nick Claxton, Noah Clowney, both of their centers played in the game against Sacramento. They did not play tonight. Brooklyn ends up scoring 128 points, and 41 of which in the fourth quarter. So I'm curious what people believe happened in this basketball game tonight. Is there anything picture you're taking away? Is it just a one-off? How are you feeling after the Warriors blow another double-digit second-half lead? 888-957-9570. Cam, if we can, let's go to Drew Down in Tracy. Drew Down, what's going on? How we doing?
What's going on, E-Dog? Long time no talk, man.
Yes, sir.
Just an inexcusable loss inexcusable loss, brother, to blow a 17-point lead in the third quarter and an 18-point lead in the third quarter, in back-to-back games. That just can't happen, especially for a team, this year that had showed that they have, bigger aspirations than just, making it to the playoffs, especially with the Nets, on a back-to-back. I thought the game was lost, towards the end of that third quarter. Draymond exited the game with 5 minutes left in the third quarter, up 14. Curry exited the game with 4.5 minutes left, up 9 in the third. And they both did not re-enter the game until 7:29 left in the fourth. At that time, they were down 4. So minus 18 with Dre off the court, minus 13 with Steph off the court. Draymond and Curry both ended up only playing 29 minutes each. I know we got a deep bench, but especially after the way the game went on Saturday, I thought this was a game that they couldn't mess around. And I think Kerr gets a little bit robotic with his rotations and his normal stuff, but I felt like they should have put their foot on the throat, man, and finished that third quarter strong. I mean, the Nets had guys who played 41 minutes, 37 minutes, and those guys played last night. So I don't want to pin the game on Kerr, but I thought there was a lot of, questionable, rotation decisions today, and just a loss that they really shouldn't have had, man. And it's frustrating, a game that they should have absolutely won. So they didn't play Saturday. They don't play till Wednesday. So I didn't feel the need that they needed to give Curry or Draymond, any kind of extra rest. I really thought they should have, played those guys a little bit more and really ensured they got the win tonight. So they got a tough game on Wednesday. So, both losses and a game on Wednesday against the Thunder, going to be a tough test. So we'll see what happens. But yeah, frustrating loss, and let's hope they bounce back.
Appreciate it, Drew Down. Yeah, a lot of good points there. I think, first and foremost, it is a frustrating loss. You lose to a Brooklyn team that, you're favored by 13 points again, depending what book you're looking at. That's a frustrating game, especially on the heels of San Antonio. But, again, like last game, it was clearly because they weren't able to get a bucket. Now, they gave up 33 points in the fourth quarter to San Antonio, but the fact that they only scored 13 highlighted to me just basically people put 10 caps on the rim. They were not able to score. I thought they basically were just outplayed and out-hustled down the stretch of that game, and it made sense. 3 games in 4 nights. You don't want to lose that game, but that's a San Antonio team that Wembanyama was fantastic. Like you could understand. I'm not saying that they should have lost that game, but there are reasons why you can understand why they fell to San Antonio. Again, the fatigue. I thought Wembanyama in the fourth quarter was the best player on the floor. The Spurs have veteran players, Paul, Barnes. They are figuring themselves out, but a lot of those players have been in that situation before. Tonight, Brooklyn has players like Cam Thomas, like Dennis Schroeder. They are vets. They are bucket getters. But what's frustrating about this game is that the Warriors really had no excuse. Again, they were large favorites. They had a rest advantage. I know Kuminga didn't play in this game, and Melton's out for the season, but there were several inactives for Brooklyn. So at the very least, the health advantage was even, and the Warriors just got outplayed. Now, with Kerr, and I do think there's reason to criticize him here. In the micro, I think Steve Kerr was too concerned with the macro. To your point, Drew Down, I think he got cute with not playing Curry or Draymond for an extended period of time. Now, again, Curry was in at the beginning of that Nets run. After the 7-12 minute mark when they led by a game-high 18, Curry was in for the first 9-0 part of that. Draymond was in for the first few baskets of that. Doesn't mean that they should not have come back into the basketball game with less than 7.5 minutes left in the fourth quarter. I thought that the game might have already got out of hand at that point, and you're basically asking Curry along with Draymond, both offensively and defensively, to bail you out. So I think Kerr got too cute in this game because just like the rest of the Warriors, honestly, I do think they overlooked Brooklyn. I think they overlooked the Nets. I think they saw OKC coming in on Wednesday. I think they probably were feeling themselves quite a bit. 12-4, number 1 in the West. We can just sleepwalk our way through the Nets, who beat a Sacramento team the night before, second game of a back-to-back. They'll just roll over. They're pretty content with their road trip so far. And Brooklyn took it to them. You got to give the Nets a lot of credit in this basketball game, and I think the Warriors got taken advantage of for overlooking their opponent. And that's simply what it comes down to. I think the players overlooked the Nets and the roster and the amount of inactives they had. I think Kerr overlooked Brooklyn and that's indicated by how much he played Curry and Draymond in this game, both trying to keep them, and successfully did so, under 30 minutes. Nobody played more than 33 in this game. And it begs the question, I think, a little bit, and I would love to get people to weigh in on this, 888-9570. Do you think that the depth is an advantage anymore for the Warriors? It's supposed to be an advantage. What I think it does is more so keep Curry and Green, specifically those two, it keeps them rested over the course of 82. But in an individual game, I'm not exactly sure if it's giving you as much of an advantage as we just came to expect through the first 15 games of this season. The idea of the line change, of coming in and being fresh. Yes, in a perfect world, that is an advantage. But it does, I don't know, kind of give me pause when I'm seeing Brooklyn throw up 128 points. They looked faster tonight at times. The Warriors were turning the ball over. Again, Brooklyn hit some shots, but I just wonder if the depth is as big of an advantage the further we move into the season as we're making it out to be. I think it helps suppress Curry and Draymond's minutes, which is important if you're going to keep them healthy over the course of 82. But we are going to run into nights like tonight where you just don't really see the Warriors looking as rested or more rested than a team that played on the second night of a back-to-back. And that, oh, by the way, didn't have their best score for the entire fourth quarter in Cam Thomas. And Cameron Johnson was also, incapable of finishing this basketball game. He played just 14 minutes. So you can make the case the Nets did not finish the game with their two best players, and they still managed to hit 23s, get to the free throw line 30 times. They were almost as even on the glass as the Golden State Warriors, and if not for a +4 offensive rebounding advantage, the Nets would have won the rebounding battle despite not playing with either of their two centers. The hustle stats are pretty similar. 8 steals to 6 for Golden State, 5 blocks to 3 for Golden State, 32 assists. The Nets were pretty much working one-on-one, and I should say that the Warriors had 32 assists. The Nets only had 23. That tells me that they were able to get penetration. They were able to win one-on-one matchups, and the Warriors defensively were not as perimeter-oriented as we've seen them in the past. So, that also does not necessarily bode well, because I looked at this Brooklyn Nets team as we set up for Wednesday against Oklahoma City. You kind of look at this Nets team as being at full strength, like an OKC light. They shoot a lot of threes. When they have Nick Claxton, they play with sort of a traditional 5, and they just have bucket getters all around, and they play, pretty loose on the perimeter, but that style of play has given the Warriors fits at times this season, and it certainly did tonight. The length, the athleticism, that's not something that we haven't seen before, even though the Warriors, again, are 12-5. So these are more of some underlying things that I've noticed through the first 15 games that unfortunately have showed up over the last 2, and I'm just curious what people think about it at 888-957-9570. David is in Maryland, if we have him, Cam. Can we go to David in Maryland? Well, first of all, appreciate you staying up late, David. What's going on?
Hey, man, I'm doing okay. Well, not really. I can't lie to you. I'm doing pretty bad, but we're going to get through it, man. We're going to get through it.
No doubt.
Yeah. I wonder if we are giving Steve Kerr a little bit of a pass here. I do see that you did mention that Kerr is a bit at fault. This is one that he's probably going to have to take on the chin. But, this is not the first time that we're seeing things like this happen. I see a bunch of talk online about people being utilized at the most appropriate time in the game. Bringing Moody back in probably would have been smart. And I recall back to a time when Jonathan Kuminga was not brought back on the court last year. And I think was it Jokic who hit the game-winning half-court shot, and I saw the camera pan to Kuminga, and he walks off, and it's the same thing that's going on. It's a repetitive thing. I don't care if we're playing the Brooklyn Nets. I don't care if we're playing the Pistons. I don't care who we're playing. We have to keep our foot on their necks. If we're up, we have to keep our foot on their neck and keep going. We have to bring Curry back in when it's appropriate. I recall back to a post-game interview where Curry himself said, they asked him, was he tired in the game? Did you feel any fatigue during the game? Curry says no. And I don't believe that Curry is tired. I'm not an NBA player, I'll give that, but I don't think that Curry's tired. I do believe what you were saying in that Kerr is probably trying to keep them under specific minutes, Curry and Green. But I mean, we shouldn't underestimate any basketball team, Brooklyn Nets or anybody, I don't agree with the way Kerr has been doing this. This is not the first time that it's happened. I'm watching it all the way over here in Maryland. And I'm just telling you from someone all the way over here, he does it all the time, and he's going to come up with the same excuses. And it's frustrating. It really is frustrating to see. We have good depth, but what is depth if we're not going to utilize it at the appropriate time? And that's really all I have to say. I mean, Curry's still a great player. Let's use him before we get down a couple of points, not after. It's frustrating to watch him do that. He's still a great player. Let him play.
I got you, David. Appreciate the call. Again, 888-957-9570 is the number. Evan Giddings with you on Warriors Wrap-Up. Yeah, I think, look, this was a game that, and so I agree with you that if there's someone to blame this loss on, to me, it is Kerr. And it is because, but it's also because of the process that's helped them build a 12-5 record. So while, again, in this one game, he is at fault, I don't know if there's necessarily a reason yet to go into these wholesale changes. And if it is, to me, prioritizing particular players becomes a difficult choice because Curry and Draymond are their two best players. Wiggins is, I think, with what he's done offensively, in addition to what he can do defensively, he's established himself as their third best player. So those are your top three guys. Tonight, they played 11 dudes, and all of them got at least 13 minutes. From 4 through 11, positionally, just take yourself out of it. Not talking about positions. It's hard for me to look at the 4 through 11 and say, who was discernibly better than the other? Moses Moody had an extremely nice stretch in this game. He scored 12 straight points in the second quarter. He ends with 15, which is tied for a season high in 16 minutes. I thought Moses Moody was really good. Moses Moody was also in the game at the time in which the Nets were beginning to make their run. Did Moody outplay Lindy Waters III? At times, yes. I thought Lindy, 28 minutes is a lot for him. But I don't think that he and Moody are in a vacuum that much different. I don't think one is necessarily that much better than the others. Podziemski is on the floor, and he was not very good again tonight defensively, but he helped move the ball. He had 6 assists. Podziemski was getting taken advantage of. Podziemski was defensively a player that the Nets hunted relentlessly, especially down the stretch of that game. But if Curry's not on the floor, which he wasn't, to your point, David, during a large portion from the middle, stretch of the third to the middle stretch of the fourth quarter, well, Pods has to be in the game. Because as we've seen, the Warriors, even with Curry in, they have trouble taking care of the basketball. I thought Trace Jackson-Davis and Kevon Looney, in a perfect world, those two guys are playable against the Brooklyn Nets team. But the Nets just decided to say, F it, we're not playing a center tonight. We're going to play a couple guards and just wings. And so eventually those two players kind of get played out, and Kyle Anderson has to step in. I thought Kyle Anderson was not great tonight, and he got taken advantage of. Kerr, to me, was grasping for air, trying to find anybody that could help put a pin in the Nets. I mean, gosh, close to 12-minute run they made from the 7-12 mark of the third quarter till about when Curry and Draymond came back in with about 7.5 left. And so if there is a place to criticize Kerr, to me, it would be the fact that there was not enough urgency to go to your two best players or even your three best players. I mean, Wiggins played in this game, but he, Draymond, and Curry were not in for the majority of the time in which Brooklyn made their 26-6 run. So, but again, when you're telling me with how you started this season that your strength is depth, then you should be able to not get outplayed by 20 points over the course of 10 minutes if depth is what you're going to lean into. If depth is truly a strength of this team, then you should have enough confidence that the players that are either coming off the bench paired with certain starters or vice versa, those should be good enough to help you stay afloat while Curry's out of the game. Also, it was interesting to me tonight that Curry was unable to get to the rim. Now, Curry's a player that, he scored 28 points in 29 minutes, and I think he was shooting quite a bit. He shot the ball 17 times in 29 minutes. That's not an insignificant amount. But I do think, again, that the length and speed of teams, not just Brooklyn, but in general, are going to bother the Warriors offensively because Curry only scored from three-point range tonight. He shot 8 of 17 from the floor. He shot 8 of 16 from three-point range. There was nothing inside the three-point line for Curry. Now, he made 50% of them, but I also think that's a sign that he's not exactly getting by his man at will. He's not getting to the rim and getting downhill the way that he used to, and that might be why you're seeing 17 shots or 16 threes as opposed to 20 or more. So offensively, I don't think Curry was bad in this game. And in fact, the Warriors scored 28 points in the fourth quarter compared to 13 on Saturday. It wasn't as if they didn't get baskets down the stretch. They scored 120 points, but they gave up damn near 130. And almost a quarter of that came in the fourth quarter. And that is something to absolutely be concerned about. Defense let the Warriors down tonight down the stretch. Offense, I feel like, let them down the stretch against San Antonio. 888-957-9570 is the number. Steel Toe is in San Mateo. Wants to talk about the Warriors' 128-120 loss to the Nets. Steel Toe, what's going on, my man? How are you?
All right. Yeah. Thank you, Evan. Yeah, I'm kind of starting to see, what everybody say, seeing the same problem, even though they have more depth and they have more defense. That's why they're kind of doing well, but they still have that same problem in offense. I think Brooklyn's got one of the worst defense in the entire league. And like you said, nobody would really attack the paint consistently to get to the foul line or just get easy buckets. It's like Steve Kerr's first plan is to set up for a three-point shot, even though there could be nobody in the paint. We're going to stick to the play and set up for a three. When I'm sometimes it's do what Brooklyn was doing. They're going to look inside the paint first to see if they get an easy score, and then if they can't, then they set up for the outside three. It's like they have a very flowing theory. It's try to see if there's easy buckets in the paint, or else we'll set up the three. Steve Kerr is we're not going to look towards the paint really unless it's an accident, but we're always setting up the threes. It's like he's 3-point obsessive. Man. Thank you, Evan. Thank you.
I got you, Steel Toe. Yeah, I mean it's. The Warriors were able to score in the paint tonight. I think overall they did a pretty good job. But again, I think it's jarring to your point watching them down the stretch hoist jump shot after jump shot, and conversely watching someone like Dennis Schroeder just seemingly get to the rim at will. And it wasn't as if it was against only Pajemski. But I think Dennis Schroeder's not a dagger, but he had an and one down the stretch. So he just took GP2 off the bounce. He just beat him to the spot, got to the rim, and laid it in. And that's the kind of point of attack defense that we saw the Warriors really struggle with last season. Schroeder he's a good player. Used to be a lot better than his current form, but he scored 31 points tonight. He had 17 points in the fourth quarter. And the Warriors, whether they were switching things and not having GP2 on him early in that fourth quarter, it was, I don't know, a bevy of bodies. The Warriors just weren't able to stop penetration tonight when they needed to. Meanwhile, they offensively, I don't think were able to get into a rhythm because of how many times they were taking the ball off from underneath the basket. Overall offensively, they didn't have a poor night. They shot nearly 50%, 40% from three. Free throws are something that I think is just going to be a problem for them this year. They went 11 of 17 from the line. If you make a few more, maybe it's a little more of a game. I'm not sure. But we know that they're the worst free throw shooting team in the league. So that's just something you're going to have to overcome. How they're going to be able to overcome that, in my opinion, is going to be with defense. And tonight, there was none of that. That's why, again, this game against Brooklyn that they lost and blew an 18-point lead with in the second half is their first concerning loss of the season because they couldn't get stops when they needed to when Brooklyn didn't have arguably its best scorer in the game for the fourth quarter to Cam Thomas, arguably their best two-way player in the game in the entire second half in Cam Johnson, and they were beating you with the combination of, again, Dennis Schroeder, Zaire Williams, Trenton Watford, Shake Milton, Jalen Wilson, who played 41 minutes tonight, all of which on the back end of a back-to-back. So they got out-hustled by a team that did not have the health advantage, did not have the rest advantage, and that was something that is concerning to me. They outplayed Golden State, they outscored them, they outgunned them, and that's where the Warriors are supposed to have an advantage. This depth, to me, what it's supposed to be able to do is allow you to play defensively 100% all out, pressing, and you're supposed to be able to have the legs to remain upright and in front of guys for a full 48 minutes. And it felt like defensively, the Warriors didn't have it out of the gates, but that's not something that hasn't happened before. And I do wonder if the starting lineup is something that people are beginning to worry about, just because it's not just tonight that they've been outplayed to start basketball games. But down the stretch, it felt like defensively they didn't have an answer for a lot of players that typically you would assume that they would be able to have answers against. 888-957-9570 is the number. Let's go to Jonathan at Chase Center. Jonathan, what's up? You're on Warriors Wrap-Up with Evan. How are you?
I'm good. This was my first game of the season, and
I'm sorry.
Yeah, let me explain. So this was my 22nd season that I entered, and at one point, getting through 82 games, I went 54-28. So I got to have my own little playoffs. I won the conference quarterfinals in 4-1. I swept the conference semifinals 4-0. I took a 2-0 lead in the conference finals, only to see last year the couple losses to the Kings and the Nuggets. Went up 3-2 when they beat Milwaukee last March, but then lost my final game to Chicago, forcing a Game 7, and then tonight happened. So for all these years, looking like I might get to experience my own little NBA Finals, and to come that close, and it's unreal, and I'm already worried because not only is it costing them a game that this should have been a winnable game and the way they lost it, but I got Houston coming up next for Jewish Heritage Night. That's going to be an even harder one than this, and I don't want to go 0-2 because I probably won't have another game after that till Miami, and that's the one where, unfortunately, my loyalty split because I'm a diehard Heat fan, and I'm getting worried about their chances the way the Warriors have been looking this year versus last year when we were able to pull it off. So this one really hurt. And
sorry, we lose Jonathan there. Oh, sorry about that. All right, Jonathan. I think point taken. Tough loss, and I don't know. Like, are people reevaluating this team on the last two games? You know, it's certainly there's some things that I'm concerned with, mostly tonight, but I don't necessarily expect the wholesale changes. In fact, this week actually sets up pretty nicely for the Warriors to address some of these things that, in my opinion, are more execution based than fatigue. Tonight it may be also falling on coaching a little bit. But again, if you can't beat the Nets at home with a rest advantage, with a health advantage, then I'm not sure how much Kerr's decisions absolutely tank this game. To me, it's one that you should be able to win regardless. And there's a reason why you're favored by 12.5 or 13.5 points. Now, the reason why I say this week sets up nicely for them to, I guess, combat a back-to-back tough losses or blown leads is because tomorrow you get to practice before Wednesday, and then I don't think they play until Saturday, so they might be able to get a practice in on Friday with an off day on Thanksgiving to reset, and then you don't play until the ensuing Tuesday in Denver, which you're absolutely going to need to rest up for because Mile High is no joke, and the Denver Nuggets are not a bad basketball team, though they got absolutely shellacked tonight. God, they gave up 145 points to the New York Knicks, but still, that's not going to be an easy game. So the Warriors do have a couple of practices coming up to address this, but this is also one thing that I am taking note of moving forward. This is the first example of adversity that the Warriors are forced to deal with this season. They have lost back-to-back games for the first time this year. They have lost 3 of 5, if you want to go back to 7 days ago, which they got beat by the Clippers at down at in the Intuit Dome. And it's the first time that we'll begin to see, potentially, if they lose to Oklahoma City, it's your first losing streak of the year. But it's also the first time that there's going to now be questions about the Warriors' process. And there's going to be questions about the 11 or 12-man rotation. There's going to be questions about how much a player is or isn't playing. There's going to be questions about the hierarchy. And there's going to be questions, mostly for Steve Kerr, about his coaching decisions. Tonight, again, I thought he got too cute against Brooklyn. He, in my opinion, tried to keep both Steph Curry and Draymond Green under 30 minutes in anticipation of a big game on Wednesday against Oklahoma City. I think that the players overlooked Brooklyn. I think the coaching staff overlooked Brooklyn, and that's why they gave up 128 points to a basketball team that should not have been in this game and that you had an 18-point advantage of in the second half. So I think that mentally they slipped a little bit tonight, and mentally they were already in Wednesday. So that's why practice will be a good thing for tomorrow to get themselves reset. But I just wonder how people are feeling about all of these questions that I think the Warriors, to me, had passed both the eye and the paper tests. They were top 5 in net rating. They're kicking the crap out of teams earlier in the year. They were using depth to outrun a lot of teams that I think were also trying to find themselves. The Warriors found themselves in preseason. That gave them, I would say, a 10 to 15 game advantage over a lot of opponents that are getting themselves together. Brooklyn aside, that's a bad loss. But now as teams begin to figure out their identity, begin to figure out who they are, and maybe begin to, kind of stabilize their rotations, how are the Warriors and their depth that has been the weapon and advantage that has helped them out to a 12-5 start, how is that going to keep up? Will it be sustainable long term? Because through the first, 10% of the season looked pretty damn good. 15% of the season looked pretty damn good. As we get deeper into the year, as they begin to play better teams consecutively, and Brooklyn and San Antonio might not be one of those teams, but still, how is it going to measure up? I am very curious about that. Before we get to the top of the hour, Cam, if we could sneak Adrian and Danville up. Let's go to Adrian and Danville if he's there. Adrian, what's going on?
Hey, how you doing? How are you? Fine. Yeah, I was just telling your producer there. I just like Kerr's closing lineup. He had like 3. To me, they're non-shooters. Pods, Draymond, and GP2. I mean. Yeah. I know you want to play the defense thing, but it looked like you weren't going to stop Brooklyn today. Those guys were shooting the lights out. I think, like having a more offensive lineup, just to kind of, gun with them and maybe would have been a little bit different thing. I just don't see three guys that really can't shoot out there, at the end. It's just kind of
sure
perplexing.
Well, so and actually, Adrian, if I can, I don't know if you're still there, but and this is I'm just asking this straight up. What kind of players do you think should be prioritized down the stretch? Would you like to see more defensive-minded players, or would you like to see more shooting out there? Oh, gotcha. All right, Adrian's gone. Sorry about that. Because I'm just curious. I think this is going to be a question for the majority of the season, who Kerr has down the stretch of games and how he chooses to employ them. We can get into that on the other side. I also want to listen to Steve Kerr, so make sure to stick through the break for that. We're going to play all of Steve Kerr's post-game presser after the Warriors lose to the Nets 128-120. They blow an 18-point second-half lead, double-digit second-half lead for consecutive nights. Now 12-5 still sets up a 1-2 Western Conference showdown on Wednesday against Oklahoma City. But if they played, especially in the second half, like they played tonight, like they played the last two fourth quarters, quite frankly, it's going to be a very difficult challenge to beat a damn good Oklahoma City Thunder basketball team that the Warriors have already measured up against once and already beaten once in Oklahoma City. So they're going to be looking for some revenge. We'll step aside on Warriors Wrap. We'll be back after this. Your calls, your texts, 888-957-9570. Evan Giddings back after this on 95.7 The Game.
Xfinity here. How can we help?
Yeah, there are so many football games streaming this season. Can Xfinity Internet handle it?
But he healed now with 14 on the shot clock, 20 on the game clock. Looking left for Curry. Finds Curry outside. They leave him some room. He shoots no good. Payton gets a rebound and jammed it back.
Man.
Little elevation sensation for GP2.
So impressive.
Now back to Warriors Wrap Up on 95.7 The Game.
Evan Giddings with you here at Chase Center after the Warriors blow a double-digit second-half lead for the second consecutive game. Tonight, it's against the Brooklyn Nets, their first below 500 team that the Warriors have suffered a loss to this year. And again, it comes on the heels of the Spurs on Saturday. Up 18 with 7 to play in the third quarter. They cannot hold on as they give up 41 points in the fourth quarter. Dennis Schroeder has 17 of them. He ends with 31 as their leading scorer. Cam Thomas, for the majority of that game, does not even finish. Arguably their second-best player, Cameron Johnson, does not finish. And the Golden State Warriors, outside of Jonathan Kuminga and DeAnthony Melton, were completely healthy tonight. So, again, we're breaking this one down and kind of the underlying concerns from not just a game like this, but from back-to-back losses. You might say, Evan, what are you talking about? They're 12-5. They're second place in the West. They're looking all right, but this is a game that I think exposes a couple of questions that a lot of people have been wondering about in regards to this basketball team. And so before we get to Steve Kerr, I do want to mention, and again, the number is 888-957-9570, also the number for the Comcast Business text line, 650, pointing out, again, up 17 versus the Spurs, lost by 10, up by 18 against the Nets, lose by 8. Outscored by 20 in the fourth quarter against the Spurs, outscored by 13. From the 650, Warriors defense made Schroeder and Thomas look like the Splash Bros tonight. Inexcusable loss to a mediocre Brooklyn squad. I'm kind of with you. 2-6-2. Dub Nation is pissed about this home loss to lowly Brooklyn. Should be able to blow out and dominate teams like this at Chase. Well, you can make a case they were in the third quarter, and then it just simply got away from them with a 26-6 run over about 10 minutes that did not include mostly their two best players, Steph Curry and Draymond Green. But it's time to crash the boards, brought to you by Chilton Auto Body, the Bay Area leader in collision repair. Well, who finished the basketball game and who ended up leading the Warriors in rebounding tonight was Gary Payton II. Played 22 minutes, had 9 rebounds, 4 of them offensive. I thought for the most part he played pretty good. But not even he was able to stop Dennis Schroeder from getting to the paint. I mean, he had a play, again, highlighted in the first segment where Schroeder just took him off the bounce, got to the cup with the right hand for an and one, and everyone was looking around like, what just happened? The point of attack defense was not there, and he's probably the best player on the team when it comes to stopping quick, especially perimeter-laden guards. But let's try and figure this one out together with Steve Kerr. He was asked after the game a lot of different questions about what these last two games mean, how this last loss kind of impacts how they move forward, and how they get ready for a team like Oklahoma City, who is number 1 in the West on Wednesday. Here's what the head coach of the Warriors had to say.
Second straight game, things flip in the third quarter. What do you feel like happened?
It felt like we lost juice again tonight. Big lead, late third, and can't close the deal. So not a lot of energy, not a lot of force. And, you open up the door for a team in the modern NBA, and they might make 23s like Brooklyn did tonight. And, they did a great job. I give them huge credit. Schroeder was phenomenal tonight. And but that was the key stretch. They took a timeout late third. We're up 18. And we got a chance to put them away, and they go on an immediate 9-0 run, and then it's a game. And then again, with the way teams shoot threes, anything's possible these days.
A couple games in a row where the second unit has struggled to get its offense going in the second half. What do you need out of that unit? Why do you think that group's been struggling a little bit in the second half?
Well, we need to execute better, and that's that's on me as a coach. So we'll get them in here tomorrow for a practice, which we need, and we'll get back to executing better. But 41 points in the fourth is giving up 41 in the fourth. That's tough to overcome.
Steve, you've talked all season about how you have a much slimmer margin for error. You gave up 26 points off turnovers. What lesson is being learned or not learned as the season goes on with this?
It's an up and down season. Every year is up and down, and so we've generally done a better job of taking care of the ball for the most part. 13 turnovers is not a bad number, but they scored every time off of them, and so there were some bad ones that really hurt, and they were kind of automatic conversions, and the ones that we had really took our momentum away. So we just got to keep getting better.
And what you can look at the defense and say that was an issue, but what does turnovers do to a defense?
Well, there's nothing you can do. If you turn it over, there's going to be an advantage the other way. You're going to give up something. And tonight, a lot of threes. They took 45 of them. They also got 30 free throws. That was the focus coming into the game. We knew that their ticket to beat us was threes and free throws, and we weren't able to avoid that.
Well, you heard there from the head coach, Steve Kerr. I think that last part is how absolutely the Nets, number one, took the lead. I mean, right out of the gates, they hit 3 threes, and I think 2 of them were off of turnovers. But they got to the free throw line a bunch in the first half. They hit close to 10 threes, I believe, in the first half alone. And though the Warriors are up by 11, the Warriors on a night in which they defend the 3-point line and keep a team like Brooklyn out of the paint and off the stripe, that's a game which they're probably up closer to 20 than to 10 at half. And look, you never know. Obviously, they blew an 18-point lead, but Brooklyn just would not go away. And you don't expect any team to roll over. But again, to me, it is concerning that the Warriors were not able to put an opponent like this away. Conversely, you look what Oklahoma City did tonight up in Sacramento. Warriors are going to see them in 48 hours. The Kings were coming off a back-to-back. Oklahoma City absolutely pummeled them. They beat them by 21 points. They dropped 130. Shea had 37 and 11, and they put away a Kings team that was probably tired and defeated from taking a loss last night to these very Brooklyn Nets. The Warriors had a health advantage, they had rest advantage, and they're the better team. And they blew a basketball game that was in their hands. That to me is concerning, especially when you consider the stretch of basketball that they have coming up. It's not just about OKC on Wednesday or Phoenix on Saturday or even Denver next Tuesday. They don't play a lot of games condensed until next week. But you look at their schedule, the Warriors don't have a gimme game until, I would say, maybe January 2nd. You look at OKC, Phoenix, Denver, Houston, Minnesota twice, Memphis, Minnesota again, Indiana, the Lakers, the Clippers, the Suns, the Cavaliers. The next team that the Warriors play, unless Indiana's under 500, well, Indiana's under 500 right now, but the next team that the Warriors play that is below 500 is the Philadelphia 76ers.13 Indiana on the 23rd of December, but then it's Philly on January 2nd. So the Warriors get essentially 13 games in a row against either playoff teams from last year or teams that are right now in the top 8 in their respective comp. It is not an easy schedule that the Warriors have coming up, and it's probably their toughest test as far as an extended period of time for about a month. It's their toughest month of the season. And so, again, I'm just wondering how people are feeling about the depth, how much of an advantage it actually is, and how much the Warriors are going to be able to use that depth if it doesn't show up against a team like Brooklyn. I think in the micro, tonight, Kerr and the Warriors simply overlooked the Nets. You heard a lot at the podium from Kerr that kind of was along the lines of, well, this might have been my bad, and we might have done this the incorrect way. Curry probably, in my opinion, should have played more than 30 minutes. Draymond, the same. Moses Moody probably should have played more tonight. But as the Warriors continue to get deeper into the season, and if things go like they did tonight as well as in San Antonio, those questions are going to get louder. Those questions are going to become much more common. Should this guy have played? Should that guy have played? How come Steph didn't play more? How come Draymond didn't play more? And Kerr's not always going to have the answers because the Warriors' process that has led them to a 12-5 start has to do with depth. It has to do with playing a lot of guys. And when you're winning, that works. But when you start to lose, when you start to blow double-digit leads against inferior opponents, well, then you open yourself up to criticism. And that's when seeds of distrust and doubt can begin to set in. So I do wonder how much the Warriors are going to be able to band together, because I think it also makes Wednesday that much more important. If you can get back and win a game like OKC, well, then that allows you to put San Antonio and Brooklyn behind you. But if you lose that game, which it is very losable, you look ahead, you got tough opponents coming up, well, then you start to wonder if this thing is actually going to work long term. And all the questions that a lot of people had about what the depth is, the 12-man rotation that Kerr seems to want to play, how much is that actually going to be sustainable over the course of 82? Tonight is the first concerning loss of the season against the Brooklyn Nets, but it's because of what happened on Saturday against San Antonio. It's because of what's coming up against OKC and a lot of better teams. And it's because the Warriors, at the beginning of the year, people wondered how much they could get done with Curry as the head of the snake and everyone else kind of filling in. It worked for the first 15 games of the season. The last two nights, you've seen some of the weaknesses about the depth-laden approach that Kerr has been employing. So I just think it's interesting to kind of view this in the macro and the micro, and how much staying power the Warriors legitimately have. I think they're a good basketball team. I've never thought they were a great basketball team, but right now the Warriors are going through their first, I think, set of adversity, similar to last year. Last year they started 5-1 and 6-2. Then that first real big road trip broke them. Will this extended stretch of quality opponents break the Warriors the way it did last year? That's a question that they have to answer, and a question that quite frankly, we don't have the answers to yet. Only they can answer with their play. But tonight was not a good defeat. It was, I don't know, but inexcusable is the word, because they're 12-5. But it's a bad loss. It's a concerning loss, and it's concerning because of how it happened, and especially the way it happened in San Antonio. But that's going to do it for us tonight here on Warriors Wrap-Up. Evan Giddings with you live from Chase Center. I'll be back on Wednesday for that game against OKC. Very much looking forward to that. 6 o'clock pregame, Warriors Live, and it's going to be a fun one. Top two teams in the Western Conference. Tim Roy's going to have the call at 7 o'clock, and well, it's going to be one that to the 408. Do you feel like the real Warriors are starting to show, or you're not that worried? I'm not worried yet because again they've only lost 2 games in a row, but I am concerned that they're not going to be able to summon a level of play requisite to beat the best of the best, which it does appear like they're going to start facing against. But again, they can prove me wrong. They can prove us wrong, and they can reinstill confidence in us the way I think they did to begin this season. So, they got everything in front of them. Tough loss tonight. Fourth quarter, 41 points. Not exactly how you want to go down. But I don't think the Warriors are... I don't think they're in panic mode just yet. There's a couple things that we got to keep an eye on moving forward. But again, we'll do that at 7 o'clock Wednesday, Oklahoma City. You can catch that right here on 95.7 The Game. Make sure to lock in tomorrow to all of our shows during the Thanksgiving week. Of course, Sponte and Butcher in the morning from 6 to 10. I'm sure they're going to have a fire show after, today was, of course, following the Niners' poor loss and just bludgeoning in Green Bay. And then a tough Warriors loss tonight that they'll break down tomorrow from 6 a.m. to 10 a.m. Stein and Guru from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. And then a trifecta, a 3-man weave in the afternoons with Willard and Dibbs off. It is Lorenzo Neal, 17-year fullback in the NFL, alongside Mark Grandy and Jake Hutchinson. And of course, we're going to take you all the way up until Thursday. We got Black Friday programming, big week coming on 95.7 The Game, and a big game also on Wednesday, which is the next time I will talk to you. Warriors Live at 6 o'clock, tip-off at 7 o'clock, all right here on 95.7 The Game. So for Cam Williams back in our studios, our Warriors Network coordinator, big thank you to him, as always, holding stuff down. Chris O'Connell in the back, I'm sure, doing all the best work, cutting things, making our sound provide A1 material for you here, and that'll do it. Evan Giddings signing off from Chase Center after the Warriors again fall to the Nets 128-120. I'll talk to you next time on your home for Golden State Warriors basketball, 95.7 The Game. Enjoy the rest of your night.
Zone. Grab some TDs with DraftKings Sportsbook. They're on sale.